generally speaking, mysticism is first realized in the soul as part, and let us say the crowning part of the human being. And don't forget, for many people, that already is a great effort to make the concept of the soul a reality. For many people already is a great achievement. You know, as I said, for the development of the intellect, that's fairly spontaneous, that you learn through training, through all kinds of forms of exercising your mind. You acquire a certain intellectual proficiency. Intuition may already be there. The heart's level very often, as Moshe already says, may be present in many people who have not developed that intellectual, because the intellect, of course, is always a divisive. You have to distinguish things in order to comprehend them. So it will always be a divisive quality, but you have people who already have in themselves that depth of the mind, that heart's quality of feelings, which is already present in them. And so they will have no problems with the consciousness of the intellect either. So that kind of person is always there. We'll always remember that. I don't mean to say that because you develop your intellectual comprehension, you become in any way better placed or better in whatever way than a person who has not that development. As long as the development of the heart is there, then the intuitive faculty is there. That is what really is even more important than that of the mind. But still, these things are within the range of human evolution. Now, of course, nowadays, even human evolution is not disregarded very much, but everything is purely practical, purely materialistic, purely practical. So even the normal human evolution has taken a rather a turn to the worse, one could say, not by intention, but by implication that has happened. And that's one thing in which one should be very conscious of, trying to have the mind and heart consciousness, as you said, developed very, very, yes, because one wishes to, one knows that there is a development there, which is necessary. But now, of course, for the soul's level, that's not something which you can so easily provide. That remains, well, really an achievement of its own. And as I always say, you know, people are fully willing to devote many years of training to, let us say, at the tertiary studies at the third level of knowledge, academic or in any other capacity, or they are fully willing to undergo many trainings, let us say, in art on the subject of the feelings, and when the training. So there, many years of training and of practice and of exercise, one takes it perfectly for granted. But then very often people think that, yes, the level of the soul, the third level, that should be done as a kind of free time observation. Well, unfortunately, we have not got time available than free time. But I remember very well once we discussed this problem with our very valued fellow Sufi from Moscow, Jalaluddin Moskalyev. And we discussed that in previous times, even in the time that Mufti Inayat Khan lived, things were so much more simple because you had lots of people who did not really work. They had these so-called leisured classes. To begin with, all women belonged to it, and many men also worked at a lesser rate or were pensioned earlier, etc. So they said, yes, it was much easier for the leisure classes with the 3 monthly summer schools in Suren to cultivate that than people have it today. Where Jalaluddin Moskalyev said very nicely, but once you are pensioned, everybody becomes leisure class. Well, I must say it is the experience of many pensioners that they feel they are more busy after their pension than before. So that's a warning we should always reckon with. But at the same time, it is true that, of course, a very consistent way of study. I mean, if you are ready to devote to either your intellectual development in scholarship, at academic level, let us say, or an artistic development through the feeling of heart and taste and all that of your heart, all these things, you are perfectly willing to devote many years to it, and devote during these years a lot of time to it. And of course, as I say, mysticism can be experienced at many, many different levels also. But if you wish to develop not only as a kind of spontaneous phenomenon that may be there or not there, and you might be aware of it or not, because of course one can be aware in certain conditions of the life of the soul when the mind and the feelings of the heart, the thoughts of the mind, the physical awareness are a bit lessened, then something of that soul's experience may already be there. But in order to develop it consciously, and especially to maintain it, and there again in Inayat Khan's mystic Sufism, that's why I always call it Indian Sufism, it is very much about, ecstasy. You achieve something and it remains there with you. As any kind of knowledge or any kind of sense of achievement remains with you, it's something you have acquired, and it's always there. Whereas the so-called ecstatic, which is the non-Indian, is very often the ecstatic mode of rising above oneself and being conscious of an inner reality is wonderful, but it comes and goes. It's not something which is permanently there. It is something which comes and goes and which you have to evolve all the time anew. And of course, for people who are fortunate enough to be able to afford a kind of permanent awareness of inner reality, that becomes more and more easy throughout time. But all things simply have very different levels of reality. And it is not, if you have a slight level of reality, that doesn't mean that it has not its own function and value as well. As I always say, all kind of things you must have heard me say, I don't know how many times before. But anyway, it is so. Take medicine. All of us may, if we may have a little plaster or a little balm or something, we go to the whatever you call it, these people who have you buy these kind of little medicine for your cough or for your cold or for something. Okay, everybody has sufficient knowledge of medicine to go buy himself something to against his cold or whatever, or a little wound and he has a plaster. Well, we know that much. But that doesn't make us surgeons able to do, brain operations or things like that. So we are all at a level of different levels of medicine, of medical knowledge. But the fact that one is not a medical surgeon does not bar one from buying, a kind of pill for your cold. So there are different levels in which a certain knowledge applies as well. So even if one cannot be a full-timer with all these possibilities which in practical life one may not have, one may have sufficient values, awareness of the soul's life to integrate it in the life you follow. And the wonderful thing of Inayat Khan's teaching is precisely that is what he aims at. He wants to give people something they can live with throughout their lives, not just to, become a separate specialist in a particular field and go on living in that field all the time, but to integrate mysticism and the level of the awareness of the soul within the consciousness you have of your everyday personality. Yes, very specifically, he says, it's not about renouncing life, it's not going into something, but do integrate that sense of the awareness in your everyday life. And then, of course, he says somewhere, that those passages as well. He says that, it's meditation, if you sit down for meditation for a little while and you forget all about it for the rest of the day, it is like a person who goes to church on Sundays and forgets everything about religion the rest of the week. But that's all people that think that meditation, then once they've done it, they should go, then we should meditate all day long. But what Murshid means is maintain that awareness of your meditation throughout the day. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you do all kinds of things, you meditate all along. You come into that kind of religious repetitiveness. And religious repetitiveness, especially not the thing which Murshid means. What he means is once you get attunement, carry something of that attunement with you along the day. And not continue that practice along the day, of course. So these things one has to be very, very aware what Murshid means. Otherwise, you make yourself many more difficulties than the Murshid intended. Because the wonderful thing is that Murshid is a teacher. He teaches you things, but he evokes things which are even more important. Start by taking in what Murshid says by way of teaching, but then realize that the impulses, the evocative spirit, the whole poetical sense which informs those words and those teachings are an even more abiding element in your spiritual attunement. So, from that point of view, enjoy your time whenever you take up Murshid Inayat Khan's teachings, inshallah.